COVID-19 has completely transformed dentistry. When the pandemic began earlier this year, governments and professional organizations alike recommended and even required shutdowns until the profession had a better understanding of how to ensure the safety of patients and staff alike while still providing much needed care. With more than 230 dental practices in 15 states, North American Dental Group moved quickly to address the coronavirus. Today we're speaking with Chief Executive Officer Kenneth Cooper, whom Glassdoor named as one of the top 25 CEOs managing the crisis, and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Andrew Matta, as they explain how North American Dental Group positioned itself to face the pandemic and what dentistry may look like in the months and years ahead. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, Kenneth, can you walk us through those early days when the company first learned about the virus and its risks, and what were the steps that you took to mitigate its effects?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It was early March when we all came to the conclusion that this was real, this was happening, and there was no more hoping that it wouldn't impact the U.S. at the degree that we all, I know, were hoping it wouldn't. And our model is designed as a group affiliation model. So although Andrew and I are often referred to as the founders, we have group founders in all of the states we operate in. So we really work as a collective group. And so we started holding partner calls, as we always do, because we very much act and move in a democratic way with the voice of the group founders. And Andrew really led those clinical calls with our group founders in each market. And by the time we were around March 10th, and again, approximately March 10th, a couple of the partners spoke up and just said, look, we're reading a lot about our role in this, and flattening the curve became obviously a term that was used quite frequently there in the early days. And many of our partners said that they felt that, to be a socially responsible neighbor, we needed to do really both. We needed to be there to support primary care and make sure that we were not allowing dental emergencies to trickle into the ER so they could focus on COVID patients and the surge of patients that we knew would be coming, was already, quite frankly, impacting New York City. And also in areas where we needed to be socially responsible as neighbors, flatten the curve, we needed to downsize the business to make sure that we also were not participating in spreading the virus. And so again, I'll take a minute here and just say the group founders, led by my co-founder, Dr. Matta, Andrew Matta, who's with us today, really made the decisions. I was in the room and I supported the decisions they made, and I'm certainly encouraged all the sharing of that voice collectively. And in hindsight, I think we played the hand of cards we were dealt to the best of our ability. And we made the right decisions at the right times. And I think Andrew and I have always anchored to the concept of, always do the right thing, even when it's the harder thing to do. And that's how I believe we were able to prevail through this crisis, by first flattening the curve and being socially responsible. And then when we knew more, and also reducing down from 230 to 50 locations to serve the ERs. Then we were able to start, when we knew more, we were able to start standing the business back up safely with the proper PPE to protect our teams, our patients, and be able to navigate that while putting, from our view, both the team and the patients first the whole time.
Okay, and Andrew, as the Chief Medical Officer, can you provide some more clinical detail about what those infection protocols were like in those early days? Where did you get your guidelines, and how did you move to implement them?
Yeah, I think that in the same manner Ken talked about, we had our partners, our founders come together, and it was early. We were very proactive. We decided, okay, how do we navigate this for our organization? And then what's our responsibility to the public health measure? So when we made that decision that we're going to flatten the curve, we're going to, focus on essential, there was a lot more questions that started coming up. What does it mean to take in patients? Who should we see? What is actually essential? What isn't essential? So the doctors and just put task teams together on each one, and had individuals kind of map out the guidelines that they thought would be appropriate. We debated it as a group of clinicians, and at the end of the day, published it to share with our our own offices and our teams on, hey, here's a grid of procedures. Here's what we would deem to be something that you would need to treat urgently. Here's procedures that may be able to be held off until we know more about the pandemic. And a lot of those guidelines, actually, we started to share openly. We had other groups, other practices, friends, colleagues that were reaching out saying, how are you navigating this? So we actually opened up a open source landing page that we just published all of our guidelines and our protocols. And those seem to be widely utilized by the profession as a whole. So it was our doctors that just came together and used our best expertise to write in check-in procedures, to determine what PPE, and then more information from CDC started to publish and evolve. And obviously, as those did, we were evolving things daily because, back in March, April, there was so much happening from one day to the next. So we made sure that we were constantly trying to stay ahead of it and navigate all of the things coming at us. And as the agencies would put something out with more information out, we would make sure to update ours and continue to. There's still the safety committee meeting regularly and making sure that at least once a week we are publishing to our doctors, our hygienists, our teams on, hey, here's the updates.
Okay, and it seems like with such a big practice with, as you said, 230 reduced to 50, but that's still a significant number of offices and clinicians and employees. How did you manage the challenges of navigating just so much volume of personnel and treatment that needed to be provided?
Yeah, the first thing we did was set up a war room. So we were meeting twice a day in the war room. We would start the morning with the entire, senior management team meeting to discuss how are we going to deploy and communicate within this environment, and how are we going to really bring the business down to 50 first safely, and with putting our teams, families and themselves, at the forefront of our decision making. How are we going to do this in an empathetic and loving and thoughtful way? And then second, how what you asked, how are we going to actually deploy? So what we really came to, the early decisions were, we had obviously supplies at all 230 locations, and we were in essence going down to one location per region, and that location would be deemed the urgent essential care location, where we would partner with the ERs to keep the hospitals free of dental emergencies. We then, some of the early decisions were, hey, let's take all the PPE that we have at the other 180 locations and move those to the 50. And we also created an opt-in environment for our teammates. So no one ever felt as though they had to come into, if you were at that one of those 50 locations, in no time was any directive by the clinicians or the partners given that you had to come into work. It was an opt-in or opt-out scenario. We really felt it was important that people made the best choice for themselves and their families. And we had so many frontline colleagues willing to step up and serve those patients. It was overwhelming how many, we actually had more that wanted to than we had offices available. So again, a huge just moment to reflect and share gratitude on our team and the broader team and how they stepped up to really navigate it. But those were some of the mechanics of the early decisions. Was let's build a war room, let's make sure we're meeting twice a day, make sure all the group founders are involved in those decisions, and then we would communicate out through that mechanism. One thing that I will say, one of the many silver linings through this was the communication in our organization elevated to a much better, higher level throughout this. We really learned, how to communicate better as an organization as a result of having to manage all of this in this type of strenuous environment. And again, I'm going to shift 100% of the credit to Andrew, to the PDA, the Professional Dental Alliance, which is our founders, our medical board, really. They just made all the right moves at the right times.
Okay, and of course, during all this time, as you said, communication is so essential. Andrew, can you, what was your back and forth like with the day-to-day clinicians in guiding their care? Were you involved in setting up those infection control protocols, directing them on specific cases, fielding questions as to, oh, is this essential? Is this not essential? What were those nuts and bolts daily decisions like?
Yeah, so great question. And we did a couple things. One was make sure that internally we had on our SharePoint site all of the resources, all of the different things that were ready to go for guidelines, policies, check-in procedures, all of those things. We also set up trainings so that if an employee that wasn't working, if a team member was going to start, they went through a set of trainings, and we made those digital. Our team was so incredibly responsive to get things done rapidly, so that everything was ready, so that they'd be informed of, okay, I'm going to go in. I haven't been, when we went to from 50 to 51 offices or 52, that whole team went through training for, a day on, hey, here's the safety, here's what to expect. But then we also set up, communication calls. So we had doctors come together, and this was a couple times a week, in the evenings at about 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Eastern, and would just have an open Q&A. Like, here, let's review some of the things that are happening, and what questions do you have? And what we did is enlist the individuals that were on the front lines, that were experiencing things, and they would share, hey, here's what life is like, or here's some of the things. So it would be, individuals that might be stepping into it would be able to hear from the individuals that had days or weeks already being a part of it.
Okay, and what was the morale like among the clinicians and other staff members? It seems to have been such a trying time in so many other places.
Yeah, I'll start. Morale was actually really good, and we wanted to make sure that it maintained at a high level. We took every opportunity to shout out and share gratitude for the frontline healthcare workers in our organization, and just make sure that they were really pushed to the forefront in our communication. I think one of the reasons our organization was identified through the crisis is again, it comes back to that communication. Acknowledgement of the team was really top of mind at all times. Like these folks were really walking into an unknown environment that was known to have consequences, and really for the benefit of the communities they serve. I mean, what an amazing call to action for them to step in and do that. And we just continued to acknowledge that. So I think morale maintained at a high degree. We also set up for the folks that opted out or we weren't able to bring back sooner. We, again, through those war room settings, through the group founders, we discussed, we created, first of all, we extended PTO for everyone. And then we created a second round of where folks could borrow against future PTO. So really we created 2 rounds of additional PTO. We also set up a nonprofit fund for folks that were having difficulty getting on unemployment in the states they were in, because there was so much from every industry coming into those state unemployment offices. We had many teammates that were just struggling to actually get filed and start getting their first checks. And we wanted to make sure that our teams were covered. So we set up a nonprofit to be able to distribute funding to folks that were really moving into desperate territory, that were not able to get aligned with state and local unemployment offices fast enough. And then in addition to that, we recognize that our providers, who are typically higher earners than maybe some of the hourly teammates, they weren't going to have enough from unemployment to cover, the lifestyle that they had built through their higher earnings. And so we created safety net plans for many of our providers to make sure that they had additional support, so that, again, always keeping in mind, put the team first, they put the patients first. And if we do those 2 things well, things will prevail. And I think they did.
Okay, and across the company, how did the patients respond to all of these changes?
Yeah, so the patients actually received it incredibly well. We did some proactive things too. So for a patient coming in, we'd send emails out with videos of, here's what to expect, here's the PPE, here's the process that we're going to do, so that you can be sure that the office is safe and that we're taking an abundance of caution and all of the things. So we made educational videos, 30-second videos for the patients. We also posted on social media so our patients could see. We made them a little bit more lighthearted as well. We made sure that they got to see, okay, here's the check-in process, but also here's the connection that you're going to be able to engage with the team members. And it was really well received by the patients. And in fact, I think that at each step, we were even a little bit surprised at the volume of patients that were coming back, especially once essential care opened up to, different aspects of care in May and June, et cetera. So the patients came back quickly. They continue to. Our patients are reassured and feeling good about the safety at the offices. So it's been well received, and patients do have a lot of questions. There was some media around the safety at dental offices and things like that. So but when they got to understand and And when you can be a little bit more proactive and not waiting for them just to ask, but giving them additional information, it went a long way.
Okay, and now dentistry has made the turn back to not necessarily return to normal, but most practices are open now and they're providing the full range of treatment that they briefly weren't able to. How did NADG manage that transition to this new normal we're now experiencing?
Yeah, for us, it was, again, similar to bringing the organization down to 50 locations. Now, how do we call back? We have 3,000 teammates across these 230 locations, including the central team that supports them. So, how do we go about bringing folks back in a way that is educating them to make sure they're safe on the way back in, making sure we had the PPE and all of the appropriate guidelines in place. So that in itself was, a massive undertaking by everyone. And so, again, we applied the same methodology, standing it back up as we did when we had to retract the business. And again, I think that the team, just shined. They stepped up. They did a fantastic job. And we even went as far as we commissioned some independent surveys through this time. We worked with some companies and organizations that did surveys for us. So we wanted to gauge what was the patient's sentiment, what was the patient's thought around this, and we again openly shared and published that data. We did I think 2 surveys, somewhere between April and July, just to get the patient pulse, and then we again through the COVID-19 dentalresources.com website that Andrew and the partners built, we shared that patient survey with everyone, as well as the ADA, ADSO, DEO, all the organizations out there. And again, our mindset has always been, I take this back all the way to 2008 when we formed the organization. We always want to pay it forward. How can we really move the industry forward through this, through all of this? And I think this is, the COVID crisis has created a real catalyst, a real opportunity to truly move the industry forward. There are, again, so many silver linings that we've found throughout this and been able to improve actually the organization through some of these challenges.
Okay, and what were specifically, were there any incidents or obstacles that you could point to and say, yeah, that was a tough one and this is how we overcame it? Maybe a bit more anecdotally?
Andrew, do you want to take that one? Do you maybe want to talk about testing? I mean, I know we're still working on our testing pilot. Do you want to talk about that's a challenge where we saw an opportunity and you really, tipped the spear out there and you still are working with, your colleagues driving this forward. Why don't you share that?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with it too, is when we were sitting in April, we didn't know what it would take to go about, bringing patients back, bringing team members back in a more, as normal as it could be, essential, non-essential, full scope of care. So we started to navigate, implementing testing, COVID-19 testing in our practices. So there were obstacles. There was obstacles because of regulatory. Is this within the dentist scope? And certain practice acts would navigate that. So we created workflows with primary care and made sure that there was no, even though it still seemed as though it was, we just wanted to make sure that we were, very instrumental in it. And then if a patient was positive from a test, making sure that they already had that connection, that primary care was a part of the treatment, the initial therapies, and et cetera. So we continue to have offices in the pilot process of implementing COVID testing. Now COVID testing is potentially expanding to delivering vaccines. There's been some states already proactively putting in governor orders and things like that to allow for dentists to be able to implement immunization and vaccinations. But yeah, those are obstacles. Those are things that show where the profession is navigating things and maybe a little bit outdated, where some of the scope of care and things like that need to be a little bit more clear as to having dentists being able to be an access point for patients there. So we did a great job. We continue to have, you interviewed Dr. Cannon, you said prior, he's incredibly proactive and a visionary with what he does with healthcare, with testing, et cetera. He's one of our pilot offices as well. And yeah, so while it has highlighted obstacles, it's also put a spotlight on opportunities that we have in the profession, and we're continuing to try to take a lead role in that.
Okay, and just one more thing then. The crisis isn't quite over yet, but it seems that dentistry has learned a lot of major lessons about how to deal with such health issues. What were some of the biggest lessons that the company learned, and how do you think that's going to affect the way you move forward in the future?
Andrew, do you want to lead on this one? I feel a real medical side to this one. So
Yeah, there is there's just a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of good things that that dentistry has learned through this. I think it's not over, right? I mean, COVID fatigue is a real thing as well, so we have to stay vigilant in how we're navigating care for patients. We have to make sure that we're still going through the extensive process. We need to make sure that we're staying very safe with every patient, every visit. We need to make sure that our team members, when they're in the break room, are wearing PPE and continuing to create reminders, and we're doing that. So the word normal is very much in quotes, right? It's a new world, and we're healthcare providers. We're proud that we're able to serve patients, and now being able to go back to full scope of care for our patients. But we have to do it, and we have to stay very vigilant in safety. I mean, safety, safety, safety has been our motto through this, and it needs to continue that way.
Okay, and Ken, any final words from you?
yeah, just building on Andrew's safety comment, the things that I've learned, I've been in this seat for almost 13 years now. I think our team needed and wanted to feel safe and cared for, and they wanted communication and transparency. And so I learned to be even more vulnerable as a leader, and when I didn't know, admit that I didn't know, but we would be there with them arm in arm, and we will figure it out together, because I shared this with the team early. The organization is the people. And so if you really show them care and concern, and you look out for them first and put their safety first, you'll have a company to come back to. And that was really what we needed. It was a company to come back to. And so we paid a lot of attention to the people and our communication and being transparent with them. And when we didn't know, we owned it. And when we did, we shared it quickly. And that was, if you want to ask the secret sauce at NADG, I think that's what it was. That's where we prevailed.
Okay, great. Well, Ken, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and your experience in navigating the pandemic. And we do look forward to learning about what the company does in the future as the crisis continues.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having us.
Great. Have a great day. Thanks again.
You as well. Thank you.